Sam Taylor Johnson is this week's guest on In Her Words. Sam is sharing the personal and career journey that got her to this place, directing Back to Black, the Amy Winehouse film currently in theaters. She tells some challenges, what she hopes to do next, and how she handled the responsibility of bringing Amy's story to life. We hope you enjoy. Well, thank you, Sam, for doing this. We know you are in the middle of such an exciting time with Back to Black and in press and doing, on a whirlwind. So thanks for taking the time to do this. We think
I'm
that
so happy to. I mean, immediately like the title of your podcast. There's no way I'm not doing this.
oh, thank you, thank you, and we know our audience is going to just be dying to hear this and your journey
Oh,
and how the journey of your career, the path of your career, and then especially this project because it is. Renee and I both had the pleasure of seeing
yeah,
it. Your team sent it
amazing.
to us. Yeah, it's so
Oh, thank
amazing
you.
and just such a story that we didn't know. And I think that's
Mm,
so important to tell. So we'll get into that in just a minute. So we like to ask kind of for you to talk about really how you got here. And one of the things that really stands out about your story that we'd love to hear more about is I feel like there was always a through thread of this collaboration of artists and the young British artists that you were involved with, your family being, creative and artistic. So if you could kind of talk about that before, like Sam, before you were the Sam that we know, how that creative world, that artistic world, and that artistic collaboration is so important in your life.
yeah, I mean, I could talk for the entire day on all of those subjects, so I'll try and I'll try and go through it. I mean, yeah, my family were not necessarily creative, um, but it was a turbulent childhood, a difficult upbringing, and sort of growing up partly at some point in a commune and then not with my father. And then, I mean, it's complicated. And I think, without going into it, because we don't have all the time in the world, it really just created an escape portal in my mind that was where I kind of created, I guess, a fantasy life, fantasy kind of world of other things. And I guess that's where the creative spirit and path, almost started. I just sort of lived an entire different fantasy world to the reality that I was in. And I think, a lot of people, when they go, they sort of have, you know, trauma in their childhood, create that space. And I think that has never left me. And that is, you know, you get to a place where I am now, and you think, am I grateful and thankful for that, or would I, have had preferred an easier ride as a young person? But the thing
Yeah.
is, as an artist, because I grew up then through the art world, it was just having that sort of sense of freedom of spirit that, and I sort of very much lived in working sort of 3 bar jobs at night so that I could be an artist during the day. And I think that that spirit is what has just carried me through my whole career path and life. And I'm very much a person that sort of wants to seize every opportunity, sometimes to a fault. I'll just jump into something that's a huge overwhelming project, and then process what that is
Yeah, you
later.
do not
And
take
so,
the little tiny under the radar projects.
no, and I think I'm that person, I guess, because of my background and everything that sort of came with it. I'm just like, oh, a positive opportunity, or someone's offering me something, someone wants me, and I'll leap, and then I'll just go, oh my God, I didn't realize. Why didn't I process what I was jumping into here? Or maybe I should have spoken to a few people before I took this on. But at the same time, that path has led me to today talking to you about a movie that I'm, so proud of. And so, for all the trauma and madness of my life, I have to be grateful.
No, it's so interesting that we hear that so often. We hear that it is the escapism of of a childhood, or escapism of something that led to that leads to that creativity, that need for imagination that really leads to so many people in our industry. And so how so you started out in fine arts and so tell us a little bit about the things that came your way, and whether they were challenges, whether they were blessings that kind of came your way that led you through the fine arts and then into film and into you
Well,
were
I
a renowned
mean,
photographer.
yeah. I started, I went to art school because it was the one, I wasn't at all academic. I was instinctually smart. Now, in hindsight, I've never had myself diagnosed, but in hindsight, I couldn't sit still in a classroom. I couldn't focus.
Mhm.
I was always, off in my mind, and probably if I sat down and took the time, probably would have an ADHD diagnosis because I really struggled at school. And again, as a sort of fantasist, I ended up in the art room and in the art um, area, and I wasn't an amazing draftswoman. I wasn't, particularly gifted in that way. But I think what sort of carried me through was just this sense of I had ideas for everything. I had ideas for how everything should be and how to sort of um, make something into something out of nothing, I guess, in terms of physical things and in terms of just, my life, I think. And so I left art school with, you leave sometimes with an art degree and it qualifies you for absolutely nothing in the real world. And so I was working in, bars, like I mentioned, but I also, took on a job at the what was called the Camden Palace nightclub in London, which is actually where around the corner from where Amy Winehouse lived. So, I was in that world a bit earlier than her, though. But and I was working there, and I had the bouncers, the doormen, and they were sort of like my protectors in a sense because I was the girl on the door at that moment. And I started to sort of think, I was processing late at night, protecting me from what? I'm not able to make my work as an artist in the day because I'm so tired because I'm working till 6 in the morning in this nightclub. And then I had this idea. I wanted to take these big men down to the Tate Gallery and stand them in front of paintings with their arms folded in their full, suits and black ties, as if to say they're the barrier that's stopping me entering the art world, if you like. And those were my first photographs where I had made something that was actually sort of meaningful to me in my life. And those were then picked up by a gallery, and I was, in a group show. And then I started from there. It started to roll, just, these, and I was working in photography, and then I got a job as a dresser at the Royal Opera House in London. And I was literally, throwing a cummerbund around Pavarotti and carrying a wig to, I won't say who, but, I was in suddenly the world of these incredible operatic superstars. But I was, the girl that was sewing on the buttons and pulling the trousers up. But I just felt like the music, which was played, all day, every minute of the day, because you had to listen for your cue for a rehearsal where you had to run with the costume or whatever. But that inspired me to then make this big sort of film installation work, which was called Killing Time. And, it was, I made all these friends of mine learn the entire libretto of the opera and then sit at home, and I filmed them lip syncing to that opera whilst they were drinking tea, doing the ironing, washing up. But they looked like they were singing this opera. And again, it was my life. I was living in the opera house, leading a very sort of mundane, simple life, but dreaming of something, sort of more aspirational. So my artwork was really sort of reflecting my world directly during those times, and so my career as an artist, grew and grew, and I was exhibiting, but I always felt like. I always felt like I was sort of almost destined to be in the world of film because I just passionately loved movies. I would watch movies almost every day, again, probably to engage my escapist self. And I love just going into a movie theater, sitting down, it going dark, and I just think, tell me the story. I don't care if it's good or bad. I just want to sit and watch. And I think that love of cinema, made me feel like at some point, I don't know how, that's what I would like to do. And tell me to stop if I'm boring. But
Oh, it's fascinating. Do you see our faces? We're like,
okay. And so then I guess as an artist, I was asked to be on a jury. I mean, this is a very short plotted history, but as an artist, I was asked to be on a jury of the British Independent Film Awards,
Mhm.
and they wanted somebody sort of slightly outside of the film world to come in and be a juror. I sat on the jury, and Anthony Minghella, who directed The English Patient and The Talented Mr. Ripley, he was the chair of this jury. And because it wasn't my world, I was so opinionated, probably deeply annoying, because I'd say, oh, this film shouldn't be nominated for this. I mean, the editing is terrible. And someone would say, well, actually, I edited that, or I produced that film. And I didn't know the politics or understand who anybody was. And at the end of, a 5-day jury, he said, you seem to know so much about film, i.e. very opinionated. I actually think that my company should produce maybe a short film with you, and see, whether you have it in you to direct movies. And I'd never even considered directing, because other than Jane Campion and Catherine Bigelow, I really couldn't see any visible women directors. So it just felt like such a rarefied. I thought they must have gone to, film school and studied forever. And it's, how. I didn't even think about how, because it wasn't even on my radar. But we worked together. I created a short film called Love You More, which is one of my favorite things I've done still. It's a 15-minute short film. You can find it out there. And it got nominated for the Palme d'Or at Cannes, and then suddenly, I was getting scripts to read, and then the next script that came into me was Nowhere Boy, which was about John Lennon and his early life meeting Paul McCartney, and it was offered to me after a huge fight. I mean, if we have time to go into it, but it literally was, they didn't want a woman director, which was like, okay, let me kick this door down. And finally I got them to let me have that script, and I made that film, and that then, did well and was nominated for a BAFTA. And then I felt like I was up and running. But interestingly, because Back to Black is my fourth film, every time I finish a film and it comes out and it's done well in one particular way or another, either awards or financially, I'm always at ground zero again when I try to go back out there, which is interesting because I don't see that happen to a lot of my male counterparts, as she takes a sip of her tea.
No,
Um, so,
it's
it's
available to sign. Yes.
yeah, and here I am today promoting Back to Black, which is the story of Amy Winehouse, and I feel honestly, I never take it for granted that I'm here now in this position where I'm talking about something that I passionately love and feel so proud of, and think it's the best film I've made to date. But has all the experience of every other film and artwork I've ever made is in this movie. So you can, I think you can sort of feel it in certain scenes that there's an artistic background, I guess. Anyway, there you go.
Oh my God.
Just to go back, talking about when you had your first gallery show and you started and you were
Yeah.
doing, and you came up with the Tate kind of exhibit or photography shoot. When that kind of came about, did you have dreams of having your own gallery? I'm just, in terms of your pivots, at that stage, it's like obviously you kind of knew yourself, but what were your dreams and how did those evolve over time?
As I started to create art, there was a lot of excitement about young British artists going on in London. And Damien Hirst was already, we were at art school together. He was already exhibiting in the world, and as were Tracey Emin and, Gary Hume, all these amazing established artists now. But what was what in hindsight was amazing about each and every one of them were they were always looking behind them and pulling up the person who, who they felt like should come along too. And so I was really lucky because one of those artists, Gary Hume, was like, come on, let's meet with this guy. I like the work that you're making. There was a real community
Mhm.
of support. But there was a lot of gallery excitement, but it was all, we were doing all these group shows of
Yeah.
young British artists. So the gallery idea didn't really land for me until a couple of years down the road. I was
Yeah.
still pulling pints in the bar for a while, but it did happen, and I had some good shows here in New York City, and but that sort of feels like one of my many lifetimes ago.
Yeah. How have you redefined success for yourself? Obviously you've had such critical acclaim in both worlds and or across
Mm.
all of your lifetimes. How have you redefined success for yourself over the years?
Oh, it's such an interesting question because I was talking to my husband today and he's filming a Danny Boyle movie in the north of England. And he was like, how's it all going? I was like, it's great. And he was like, how are you feeling? I was like, oh, I feel a bit miserable today because you're all not with me. And it's really hard to enjoy success when you don't, for me, when I don't have my husband or my kids around where you can go, hey, look at that poster. Oh, look, this is mom's movie. So I guess I define my success a little bit more through the eyes of my family who really don't care.
You're like, mom is mom.
Yeah, no, literally, it's like I take the red eye back on Friday
Um,
night, and my 13-year-old's like, "Are you going to be able to come to my tennis match? I'm playing in da 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 da, and it's going to be raining, so you better be." I'm like, "Oh my God, I literally am going to get off a flight at 7 a.m. on no sleep, drive 2 hours, and watch a tennis match in the rain."
yeah,
So it's how it is.
Yeah,
yes,
100%.
yes. That's interesting. I was going to ask the about the surrounding yourselves, feeling like with music and art and photography, and what Renee was asking. You're surrounded by other artists, and that has that changed now. Is it? Are you is directing more so lonely, more solo? But is it your family that now has replaced the as the kind of the support of those artistic creative support you had before?
Yeah, I realized it didn't fully answer an earlier question about collaboration, but I guess with the art world, it felt like at the beginning it was a lot of activity altogether, and
Mhm.
then everyone sort of went off into their own solo shows and success and studios. I'm not very good in a studio on my own. I sort of go into I've had beautiful studio spaces, art studio spaces, and I go in and I feel like a level of performance has to happen. Whereas if I have on a film set, I know exactly what I need to do and who to talk to and how to collaborate in that
Mhm.
sense. And it's the strangest thing for me when I first stood on a film set with, 200-300 people looking at me for what would you like us to do. It was very natural. It was a very natural experience for me to be able to say, the walls need to be pink, she needs to be wearing this, the shoes should be like that, but her mood is like this, so let's change the lighting. I felt very in tune with how to work with other people for the greater good of the whole. So in terms of making movies, it feels like the most natural place to be, and the collaboration with, now I was lucky. I had, one of the best cinematographers, Seamus McGarvey, on my first short film, and then the next film and the next film, and then when I couldn't work with him on my third film, I was literally like, it's gonna be, how am I going to do this? But um, and then since then, with this movie with Back to Black, I had this incredible cinematographer. Her name's Polly Morgan, and similar to me, she's there's not that many women cinematographers, and collaborating with her on this was amazing. But our heads of department on the movie, we were 100% women, which was,
Yeah.
it happened that way. It wasn't completely like it wasn't how I set out. I set out, trying to find the best people for the job, and yeah, but it's something I'm proud of.
You had
Agreed. The
mentioned
cinematography. Beautiful.
You
Yeah,
had
she's
you had
amazing.
mentioned before that you take certain elements like through your films. What have you taken forward, or what are the things that you kind of have learned along the way in the past four films that have led you to, into Back to Black? Just because it was beautifully shot. It's like from a director
Yeah,
standpoint, and I'm
thank you.
curious,
I mean,
what you've learned along the way.
yeah, I mean, every single experience of every film has taught me so much. I mean, even 50 Shades of Grey, which was a miserable experience for me, and there's no surprise. I've talked about it before, but it was a brutal experience. But what I learned from that was I will never compromise in my vision again, because that was a tough one, and so from that, I took that. I think from A Million Little Pieces, which was the third film I shot, was a small independent. We had no money. We shot it in 20 days. And I learned how to move at the speed of light, which for this movie was helpful because we shot 56 locations in 45 days. And we had to really move. And, we were shooting all over London because London's such a big character in the movie.
Yeah.
And, Amy was so London. But we had real problems with paparazzi following us and trying to stop us from filming, and so you have to kind of, I don't know, build and flex certain muscles
Yeah.
that I don't like conflict. I don't shout. I don't get mad at people on set. I gently negotiate with people, but when we were dealing with paparazzi, it was so aggressive. I definitely found my voice.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. When what was it like to like that first day on set for Back to Black? Kind of transitioning into talking about the project.
Yeah, it was difficult because our first day, I mean, we had a multitude of complexities, let's say. So, in order to make this movie, a true representation of Amy, we had to look at her more fragile times, her more vulnerable times, when she is, painfully unhealthy and thin and, just looking very unwell. Now, in order for Marisa, who plays Amy Winehouse, she she wanted to go to that place as far as possible, but I only wanted to do that if we could do it over months, to sort of have proper management to take her there and support. So we had to shoot the most broken, vulnerable days on our first days of filming. So that was, and then to become healthy through the process of our filming over the 3-4 months, so that when we are at the end, we shot her as a young, healthy woman. So we shot backwards, which is already quite difficult mentally and emotionally for everybody. But then our first day, not only is Marisa, feeling vulnerable. It's her first day on set. It's her first big movie. It's her first, lead role like this. But she's also feeling vulnerable and fragile in her physical self. And then swarms of paparazzi documenting, and she'd never experienced that, and so it was super tricky. And it's not just I mean, just to explain, but it's not, when I say the paparazzi, it's not just like people with cameras. They were flying drones over, so we had to stop filming, and I'm like, I have such a lot of work to do in a short space of time. Could you not fly your drones over? And they just want the shot, and then that shot is, a shot of Marisa playing Amy not looking great. So then it's tabloid stories. And so when you're making a movie up against all that noise, it's challenging, I mean, I shut myself off from it because otherwise I can't do my work, and I have to, really adhere to a single vision. But it's really challenging and unsettling for everybody around. And and also I get those friends like, did you read the Daily Mail? And I'm like, no, I haven't, don't tell me. And they're like, well, they said. And I'm like, shut up, I don't want to hear.
How do you ground yourself in the middle of all of that?
I literally do that. I literally sort of feel my feet on the ground and just, like, it's almost like I have sort of life noise cancelling skills, in a sense, where I can just zone into the work that needs to be done and just shut it all out. But I think that's one of the sort of skills I've honed over through making movies of, don't read anything about any of your process as people are sort of thinking, they have opinions, and I can't read anything. I have to just be very myopic. Otherwise, you start thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't do it like that. Maybe I should. And you can't
Yeah.
have that. Otherwise, your vision is compromised.
When you're considering projects that involve beloved, real
Mm.
famous people like John Lennon, like Amy Winehouse, and even James Frey was a real person, and even a beloved book that like, does that come into play as you're making decisions that you're going to deal with this feedback, you're going to deal with all of this because they are real people that
I'm a total idiot because I never process it. And I step in and I just go, why have I done this to myself again? Why have I given myself this extra challenge?
yeah.
Filmmaking is tough, and now I've got, a lot of expectation or opinions around it. And I must, subconsciously gravitate towards the chaos of a difficult time in order to create art, I guess, because I do it every time. And I keep saying, whatever I do next, it's going to be pure fantasy where I can just
Right.
step on and have no responsibility to anything or anyone. But I'm sure I'll find something that will be really complicated.
When you took on this project, obviously there's a huge, enormous amount of responsibility when you're representing, somebody's biopic.
Mm.
um, you know, and you talked a little bit about sticking to your vision. How do you get there? Like, what is your process in terms of how do you go from your first read into I'm going to do this project to this is my vision for it, and the research that you do and what areas and the complexities of building her within the film? What did that look like for you?
you know, Knowing who's our producer on this approached me to do it, and I said yes before I processed again what the responsibility was going to look like, and I said, but what I'd like to do is, start from scratch with the writer, if he's available, Matt Greenhalgh, who wrote my first film, Nowhere Boy, and I just want to spend time with him, and we'll sit and sort of figure out what's the film is we want to make, and very quickly in that process, I said we have to make it from her perspective, using her words to guide us and create that story, because her whole life and post her death has just been dissected, picked apart, and examined. And I felt like it was time to sort of give her, empower her again through her music and give her agency back and take away just that sense of her being a victim to the tragedy and celebrate her as a musician and as a creative being. And so the way to do that was just to constantly come back to the music, constantly come back to, the thing is, when she writes songs, she tells us how she feels about everything, about her love, her heartbreak, how she feels about, this person, sometimes funny, sometimes crushingly heartbreaking. And it was almost like every song could give me an insight into how to write and play that scene. And
Mhm.
I just felt like if I do it that way and if I do it through her perspective, then I'm sort of limited to two albums, Frank and Back to Black, where her voice is, really telling us stories. And it felt like Back to Black was the perfect sort of bookend, if you like, because it's a love story that, tells us absolutely, everything that she feels. And we go on the journey of that, no matter what our judgment and opinions are of that love story. If you're in her perspective, then that love is love is love. And similarly towards her father, and I say that because I know a lot of people who've watched the documentary, and people have a lot of judgment and opinions around it. But I felt like if I'm with her, she looks at them with love and nothing but love. And you see the relationship between a father and daughter, and you see the relationship between her and Blake, and it's a perspective of what's gifted us one of the greatest albums of our time.
It was interesting because I think, the way that the movie comes together and the story comes together, it's you tell us the story in such an intimate way about her, where it's not about the paparazzi and the fame and the celebrity, which I think you find in a lot of films that people make around specific people that have hit that global stardom. You really portrayed it, and it came through loud and clear. And I think through the acting and through the directing and through the cinematography, it really just showed who she was, because she is, at the end of the day, a woman who's struggling. And it wasn't about like, just in terms of shutting down, not really engaging the press, not wanting the press, not wanting that attention. And that was really interesting in terms of that. That's one of the things that I noticed, like, coming out of the movie. I was like, okay, she didn't want that. It was really about the music. It was about just her and her voice, and finding it on stage, and singing and making people happy, or
Yeah.
relating to people.
I mean, she was ambitious, she wanted to be the greatest singer, but she didn't want the attention and the fame in the way that she got it. And I think that it was so interesting, in the research, just to hear also about her talking about wanting to be a mother and a wife, and to be grounded, and to have six
Yeah.
children, and increasingly she would say that more and more when Matt and I were researching, which is why she says it in the movie, because I think also people forget that she's a fully rounded, complex woman who
Yeah.
had these desires, not just a singer who was so famous, but desires to just be grounded and live a relatively normal life.
Yeah.
And it was sort of, and then of course she was an addict and dealing with addiction as a disease, and never afforded anonymity. And the thing that we have Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, yet whenever she did go into rehab, it was there was always stories where journalists would break in and paparazzi would take pictures of her, and so she'd get scared and flee. And
Yeah.
so so in my mind, it's just also that thing where she just never stood a chance. And as hard as she battled all of that, and successfully for a few years, she was still always sort of hounded and followed in her deepest, darkest, most vulnerable moments.
Yeah.
Is there one piece of the film that, or her story, that you're most proud that you've put in the film that we all can know now?
I mean, so much of it I'm so proud of. I think one of the things that was the hardest thing for me is the falling in love scenes at the beginning, because I sort of set it up like a three-act structure. So it really has a beginning, middle, and end to them, falling in love. And the difficulty with that was, again, going back to it, everybody, has really harsh opinions of him. And Jack O'Connell, who plays Blake, is so fearless and really doesn't care whether people like him or not. And he played it on a very fine knife edge, of, because I said to him, and we had lots of conversation, I said, we as an audience have to fall in love with him. And we are going to go in struggling to fall in love with him because of what we know, and behavior surrounding their addiction. I said, but we have to fall in love with him, because if we don't, the film fails, because we don't then understand Back to Black, which is a love story, and it's a absolute gift of a love story to him. So if at the beginning we don't believe that love, then we're not allowing her to tell us her story. And that was really difficult to get right, really, really difficult. And I think that when people see it, you have a sense of, he comes in with the personality that we expect, but you end up seeing the two of them sort of in through her eyes of just the excitement of having found her soulmate. And I really reflected on that a lot. And one of the things, I met with Amy's parents, Janice and Mitch, separately, and they didn't have any approvals or rights over what I was going to do, but I wanted to just hear their stories, and sort of, I knew, I'm making a film about their daughter and their grieving parents, so it felt respectful. And one of the things I said to Janice, because most of the stories they told me I'd read or heard or in the interviews, I'd pretty much you know, had seen or heard everything. But Janice said one thing. I said to her, you know, did you like Blake? And she said, oh no, I didn't like him, but I didn't not like him either. And I said, that's interesting. And she said, yeah, because I have to look at it from the perspective of he showed Amy the greatest love within her lifetime, that she experienced the depth of that love is so special, she said. She said it was undeniable. She was an unstoppable train. And she said she had that in her very short lifetime, and most people don't find that.
Mhm.
So I'm grateful to that. Oh, you know. And I thought for a mother to be so forgiving and understanding of what that was kind of my North Star in the sense of just how to approach this film with that love story in mind.
I feel like we walked away from the film. I mean, I think the first thing I said after it was like, she loved him so much.
Yeah.
I mean, it absolutely comes across that she did love him so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, it's like one of the things just to talk through that you had mentioned, and you had said it in terms of like there are multiple storylines, or there are multiple characters that are almost, they're not as tangible, right? It's not just about Amy. It was like London played a story. Addiction, has a character in it.
Mhm.
How did you approach that in terms of making sure that you read like all of these kind of intangible type of or tangible in some ways characters existed within this film? How did you approach that?
Mhm.
I mean, because I felt like, I guess, we had to sort of hone down, as you can imagine, because we
Yeah.
have, you know, however many minutes it is, just under, anyway, I don't know, but I should know, but, however many minutes, you have to hone down a lifetime. And
Yeah.
so very quickly, in order to tell this story, who are the central characters now? Obviously Blake, but then her grandmother, learning about her grandmother's influence on her, I realized, wasn't a story that had been told. And Cynthia, played a huge part in her style and her music choices and taste, and jazz being such a big thing for her. And obviously her father, and the proximity of him being a singer and,
Yeah.
all of that. But then, it came quickly to me that if there are villains within the movie, the villains are addiction and paparazzi, and so creating those as characters along set against the backdrop of London. I mean, it was really conversations between Matt and I about how do we do that, and then it just, I don't know, it just became quite clear how to do it.
Yeah. Just naturally,
They
the natural villains came through.
yeah, they did, and it just felt like Cynthia was that storyline with Leslie Manville. When I first approached Leslie Manville, she said, I don't know if there's enough for me to do." And I said, "Well, the thing is, if you look at it, that Cynthia truly was the fabric of Amy as we know her. In her choices of, like, how she did her beehive, and
Yeah.
how her love of that era of music. And I said, if you look at it like that, then we can sort of build upon the story more. So once Leslie had come on, we built Cynthia into the story and the script much more, because she's such an amazing actor. She's so incredible. And Marisa and her had a real connection, and you could really feel, the scene where, without no spoilers, but the scene where she's doing her hair in the mirror is so, that day, honestly, there wasn't a dry eye in the house.
Yeah, yeah, no, you see it,
Yeah.
you do see it. Tell us about the search and
Oh,
how you approached finding Marissa
yeah.
to play Amy. I mean, that had to have been
Yeah.
just
It felt like an impossible
yeah.
task. It really did. But Nina Gold has cast the first two movies I did, and when we set out to find John Lennon, I said I don't want an impersonation. And similarly with Amy, I said there are so many incredible Amy fans and impersonators, but that's not going to hold people in their seats for an entire movie. So I need somebody who can really, on a soul level, create her. And anyway, so Nina, cast the net wide, and we met with a few people, but Marisa came in. She was the first person. I want to say, I saw hundreds before her, but she was the first person in the room, and
Really?
She was the
Yay.
first person in, and I
Wow.
met her. I met her and a few others over a few days, and then I got her back. And again, she was the first person in the room for the read through. And I put the camera on and I looked through the lens, and Marisa looked back at me as Amy. And I literally put my head to the side and saw Marisa, and then I put my head to the lens and I saw Amy, because
Okay, so
she,
chills.
I know she'd kind of created this internal transition that I could see through the lens of the camera, that was just something that's almost indescribable. But it was an instinct of, this girl, I think, can shift, because she's done it in a few minutes for me. Now on film, that's going to be, magnitude, magnified, sorry. And so I literally grabbed Nina's hand and I was like, that's it. And she was like, you've only seen one person. I was like, I just know.
That's
And I,
amazing.
I literally just know. Anyway, we did obviously, do due diligence and see lots of others, but I kept circling back to Marisa. And actually, I called Marisa straight after that audition, and I wasn't allowed to because I hadn't got any approval from studios or producers. And I was like, "You've got the job, but I can't tell you. So don't tell your agent, but just start working now." So that we've got, I said, I'm going to have to spend a month meeting other people, but just get to work.
Was that such a relief? How did that, was that just a great feeling to know
It's a
that?
great feeling, and it's that feeling of, it doesn't happen very often. It happened with Nowhere Boy, and it happened with this, where I was 100% sure, and it paid off.
That's amazing. You said something earlier about when you were starting out. So I wanted to ask you, and I know we're getting close to time, but you said, when you were first approached about directing, the only names you knew were Jane Campion and Catherine Bigelow. And how does it feel now that your name is on that, always on that list? Because when
Oh,
people
you've
talk
put a
about
smile on my face, because it's
it is. It's it
because
came to
I hadn't
Boston,
thought of that, and it's
Marguerite, Catherine, and Jane, and you're always on that list. So how does that
oh, thank you. It feels good. But now, I see now that it's broadening. We now have Greta, and we have Ava, and Chloe, and Dina. There's more and more women seeing other women direct, and stepping up. And there's a horrible statistic that 4% of directors are women in Hollywood, 4%, and I think it might have only gone up to 5% since I've known that statistic. So there's still a long way to go, but there is more visibility. So it does give me, hope that a lot more women will choose this path, and because it's an amazing position to be in. It's an amazing position to be able to, make movies with, the female gaze, in very sort of telling delicate stories about other women. And, I feel like in terms of making this, it was all about empowering Amy and taking away the sense of her just being a victim. And I think that, that it's important that continues.
and important that, yeah, that women are in charge of that message. I think
Yeah.
you said, I mean, with you directing and the women in all of the leads of all of your departments, and
Mm,
her story, her voice, her name in such good hands
yeah.
is something that we need, that care taken.
Yeah.
Sam, as you look forward, are there any projects that are on the horizon or any projects that you want to take on that you're dying to take on?
I'm going to get home, do the school run and see what comes my way.
After tennis season's over, when tennis season is over.
I think, I don't know. I really don't know. And, you get to this place where it's coming to an end. I've spent 3 years on this film nearly. I think it'll be 3 years by the end of the summer. And then, you're just like, oh, I can get back to, my life, and looking at, insurance bills that I've ignored, and things like that, all sorts of different, and medical things, getting my teeth done, all of those, getting a dental checkup. then the panic kind of settles in of just like, what's going to fill that sort of that space which never leaves of needing to be creative. So it's a sort of internal struggle of I need that space and absolutely terrified of it at the same time. And when I'm making a film, I'm just always longing for that space, and then when I'm not making one, I want to be back in it. I mean, it's just
Are you still doing photography? I take
I
it
was
yes,
just going to ask
but
that same question.
Yeah, I am, but it's difficult. I think in terms of exhibiting my art, I've found that there's a sort of level of you can't possibly do both. So therefore, I'm not, beating people away from my door. It's not like I'm being offered exhibitions, but I'm still working and I still have a studio. And I did have an exhibition in Rome in December, but unfortunately I was making the film, so I couldn't be as present as I felt like I should have been. But yeah, I am still making the work. I'm not exhibiting, throwing it out there to any gallery owners.
Call us, we'll get you in touch. Oh, Sam, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. It's been so nice
Thank
meeting
you.
you. We love
Thank
Back to
you.
Black. We want everyone to go out and see it.
I do
It's
too.
a celebration. It's informative, it's heartbreaking, it's lovely. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing it with us.
Oh no, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. To stay up to date with In Her Words, join the conversation by following Women in Entertainment on our social channels and subscribe to our weekly newsletter at womeninentertainment.com.